Welcome to another episode of Inspire People, Impact Lives. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, Managing Partner, Northwestern Mutual. And today we have a very special guest in Tom Still. Tom is the president of the Wisconsin Technology Council. The Tech Council is a nonprofit, bipartisan science and technology policy advisory board to the governor and the legislature. Its programs include the Tech Council Investor Networks, the Tech Council Innovation Network, the Governor's Business Plan Contest, and regular events that connect entrepreneurs, investors, researchers, and others with a stake in the tech-based economy. And I can't think of an industry that is not only booming, but also relevant to today's world when we're all virtual than something like this. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Josh. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. Before we dive in and get into all things tech, Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you came to be and where you're at to this point.
Yeah. Well, going back in time, I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, which is basically DC. And my father was a airline mechanic at what is now Reagan National Airport. My mother was predominantly a homemaker, but worked some in retail. And just kind of a great place to grow up because of all of the stimulation around that area, in terms of what you could learn, what you could do. And so from there, I because I was an airline brat, that meant I could travel for free to a lot of places. And so it was about getting the best offer for college. And so I wound up at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, which had an excellent journalism school, which is what I wanted to do at the time, and other interests, but it was perfect for that. And then gradually gravitated into Wisconsin, where, I'm more of a homer than most native-born Wisconsinites probably. Love the state, love being here. It's just been a great place to live and work and raise my family. And so, I was in the journalism game for, good 25 years, and I've been running the Tech Council. So since '03. So it's
coming up on 20 years.
Yeah.
So about half your career in journalism and almost half your career and now in the Tech Council.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, it doesn't seem like on an either case in terms of, the time flying aspect, but two great things and related, because all of the things that I learned in journalism really do apply to what we do at the Tech Council. I got a board of directors. They're the true tech experts in most cases. But as a communicator, as someone who knew how things worked, the intersection of business, government, education, all of that, that's where I can provide some glue to keep holding it together. But yeah, they turned out to be a great sequel in that sense.
Yeah, that's cool. So it doesn't sound like you grew up in an entrepreneurial family, but was there any inspiration? Maybe there was, and I just missed it in that part of the story, but was there anything that you grew up with around that kind of, tripped your trigger towards the entrepreneurial side of things?
Not so much growing up as I think about it. I mean, it was definitely not an entrepreneurial family. I mean, like my father, like I said, he was an airline mechanic, but he valued working hard. He valued education because he didn't have much. He had never even graduated from high school. And so, but he was insistent that the two kids, me and my brother, were going to be doing things a little different. And we did. And so, that notion of hard work and education, I think, comes in there for sure. Sure, I had paper routes. I did all kinds of little things on the side. I would have never known to have called myself an entrepreneur. I'm not sure that, I was just doing odd jobs like any other kid. But, in terms of where that first kind of bit me, I think, was when I was in journalism and worked primarily with the Wisconsin State Journal in Madison, which is a part of Lee Enterprises.
Yep.
And there I was put in charge of some what I would now call entrepreneurial assignments, and starting a civic journalism project that involved everything from broadcast video as well as radio and print, different other kinds of projects. We started a cable station, things like that were about innovation within that industry, but not necessarily entrepreneurial, more entrepreneurial.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Hey, real quick on the paper route, what ages were you?
Oh, gosh, 12, 13.
Okay. I also had a paper route. I was 11, 12.
Yeah.
And it was down in Illinois before. It was right before we moved to Wisconsin. And it was 363 days a year, 5:30 in the morning that I would do it throughout the neighborhood that we lived in. And that was, without parents' help, anything of that nature. You get out, Sunday I got out the red flyer wagon because those papers were thicker. But
Right.
every other day I just had the, strap on, the bag that you throw over your shoulder or satchel or whatever you call it. And those 363 days a year, I mean, it took a lot of hard work and instilled a lot of work ethic in me. A lot of days I did not want to get up at that time frame. What did it teach you?
You just said it. I mean, the notion of getting up early, or actually I had two routes. One was an AM and one was a PM. And so coming home from school and kind of going through the same thing. And, I've always joked that the newspaper industry was the only one in the world that relied on 12-year-old kids for marketing and distribution. Yeah, but it was that, yeah. But I was just a news bug. I couldn't wait to get those papers and kind of read them myself, and or later. It was a lot of fun, but a lot of work. And like you said, you got to stick to it. It's every day. That's why we call them daily newspapers.
Except for Christmas and New Year's Day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there was a lot, but it was a lot of good memories there too. So switching back into our more relevant topics, what is you talked about entrepreneurship with your journalism stuff, but what does entrepreneurship mean to you?
Well, it means a bunch of things. I mean, I'll just start with a kind of the definition. It stems from a French word that means one who undertakes. And so that says something right there, right? I mean, that you're undertaking some kind of task, some kind of effort, some kind of reason or ability to build a company in many cases. I think, and what it means in the larger sense to me is that notion of creative destruction, the pushing up from below. Joseph Schumpeter, he was an economist probably 70, 80 years ago, and he came up with this phrase called creative destruction to describe the notion of young companies coming up, rising up, and pushing out the old, which is kind of what happens. I mean, you see a lot of old companies that some endure and survive and change all along the way, but others don't. And so the horse buggy whip makers or something of the world that went away. And so entrepreneurship means also to me the creation of new jobs, new products, new things that you never knew you needed until they actually are there. And so it's really all about that kind of change in the economy, kind of bubbling up from the bottom.
Well, I love the definition. I don't know that many people know that, including myself, because I never just really looked it up. Yeah. But the creative destruction, that's an interesting terminology, because I think nowadays the buzzword is disruptor, right? Yeah, so right. Uber was a disruptor to the taxi industry, to travel, whatnot. Wheels Up or NetJets as a disruptor to the airline industry, right? So they use the word disruptor versus creative destruction. What's interesting in my industry, I witnessed in our organization, and sometimes I think this probably happens, as we could probably think of a couple of examples just offhand, is sometimes those disruptors or those creative destructors actually level up the playing field, where they actually push those big and old companies to become better. And that's what they should do. I think that's what Northwestern Mutual is looking to do, is to make sure that they stay relevant in we're a 164-year-old company. Right. So we got to continue to stay relevant and continue to disrupt ourselves. Otherwise, we will be disrupted.
Yes, that's and you're right. Creative destruction and maybe you can call it creative disruption are really the same thing. I mean, it's just a slightly different term now. And yeah, Northwestern Mutual is a great example because between the venture investing that goes on there, the notion of bringing in new ideas, new people, in fact, sometimes new companies almost that change and enhance the what Northwestern Mutual is. That's why they're not going to be, they're disrupting themselves as you noted, Josh.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to watch being part of the company, but also seeing like, hey, they're thinking very broadly about how do we disrupt ourselves and how do we invest in technology? How do we bring tech talent to Wisconsin?
Yes,
because we've had to adopt a lot of we have a secondary home office in New York City because there's more talent there in the tech sector currently than there is in Wisconsin, enough to fill the jobs that we actually need. But I know John Schliffsky's goal is to make sure that the majority of those jobs stay here in Wisconsin because of our home office. So that leads into some of the work that you're doing as well.
Yeah. It's Northwestern Mutual and John have been a big part of creating the Milwaukee Tech Hub, for example.
Yep.
And that is something Kathy Henrik has been leading that, and yeah, it's really all about talent and making sure that. And we try to echo a lot of those same themes in terms of what we do with the Tech Council, because it's not all tech. It's going to be people. It's going to be capital. It's going to be infrastructure, right? But all of it adds up to getting the right people to work in some of the really amazing companies that exist in Wisconsin. So. Yeah, I think it's been a great effort there.
It has, and I've seen some of the fruits of that personally here, being in the field and getting some of the talent that the Milwaukee is creating, or maybe not some of the talent as far as people power, but what they've created in our hands that our people can use, right? So that's been great. So on that entrepreneurship side of things, what do you personally believe is a great entrepreneur? And let me tee this up a little bit. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, business people, or want to be entrepreneurs that listen to our show. Yes. So I always like to ask people, like whether it's characteristics or some mistakes you see people make, what does someone need to be a great entrepreneur from your standpoint?
I think it's truly a combination of skills and attributes. I think, it kind of starts with vision, because you have to have that vision of where you're going, and then remain locked in on that as best you can when things get challenging. Hard work's a part of it. Perseverance. A lot of entrepreneurs get knocked down and they have to get back up off the floor, right? Teamwork. Sometimes entrepreneurs, you may think of them as the lone wolf out there operating by themselves, but they ultimately cannot. They really have to have a team around them. It can be described in many ways, but they have to know teamwork. I think they sometimes have to know their own limits, and that kind of correlates with teamwork in the sense that somebody might be a great tech person or a great lab bench person, but not necessarily wasn't the greatest on the marketing side, or some other piece that it takes to build a company, because it does take a lot of those pieces to make it work. I think entrepreneurs are risk takers, but not rash risk takers. I think they're calculated risk takers. And that involves, everything from cash flow to sizing up the market to knowing what the competition is. I think those are a part of it. And I think they also have to be decision makers in the sense that they can't sit on things too long. They have to make sure that they get off the dime, is one way of putting it, and that they move ahead.
They activate.
They have to be. And then, just ready for whatever that pivot might be. COVID-19 is the ultimate pivot for so many companies. Northwestern Mutual, our own, you got to be ready for that.
Yep. No, you're so right. And that's why when Chad brought this idea up of having you on, I was like all for it, because there's nothing more, like, I think it was almost a year ago, or maybe to this day, that we got, word that we're going to need to lock down, right? And so I'm going through with my team and assessing how many of our team members have the capabilities to work from home.
Yeah.
So do we have enough laptops versus desktops? Do we need to get some HD cameras, microphones, whatever it might be, so that they can fully operate from home? And then, that's not even to mention like the childcare worries in schools and, all that different jazz.
Yeah.
It's just from a tech side, are we fully capable? Do we need to get any Zoom or Ring Central or GoToMeeting subscriptions? And thank God all those things were there. But, then the Skype and some of that technology has been around for over a decade, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it got normalized over the past 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned that, a year ago today, because a year ago today was our very last in-person event. It was an event in Milwaukee with a panel of folks to talk about diverse entrepreneurs and investors. And, from different communities that maybe you don't always hear from when you think about investors. And that was our last live event. And then 4 days after that, we were scheduled to hold our tech summit at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, and which is a great place to hold it. They're wonderful hosts. But that we had to shut that down, and the Packers organization was totally understanding, but we had to go to a virtual platform in a matter of like 4 days. So that was really something.
So maybe this is a good time. I gave such a brief description of what the Tech Council actually does. Could you add more color to that?
Oh, sure.
What the programs and what the supporters and all that stuff looks like for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. And you did touch on some major points there. I would say that we live in a couple of different worlds. One is public policy. We spend a lot of time trying to provide good ideas to members of the Wisconsin legislature, members of the different state administrations. We're bipartisan, so not Republican or Democrat. We try to work with everybody, of course. We and that extends sometimes to the federal level, because we're a part of a larger national organization called the Tech Councils of North America, and so that's that part of our policy world where we're trying to come up and work on those big ideas. And over time, we've had some really great success around some of them. We have the event side, which is now virtual but still working, and we try to connect entrepreneurs, investors, researchers, others in the tech world. And finally, I'd say there's a communication side. We, and me in particular, I love to tell the story of Wisconsin, of the entrepreneurship here, the rich legacy of that, really, if you go back over time, the kinds of great talent, the notion that this is a good place to do business, and it is. And so just overall, I think those are the three areas where we spend the bulk of our time and effort. We have a large board of directors, 50-some people.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's for a reason. They're really great at showing the flag at different places around the state. If we can't be everywhere physically or even virtually ourselves, some of those folks can, and they bring so much expertise from their companies, from their own tech backgrounds, often their business backgrounds. So it's a good mix.
Good. So what do you think have been some of the biggest policy wins that you guys have had over, whether it's in your tenure or the past few years, whatever your time frame might be? Sure.
Well, I came to the Tech Council when it was very much a startup itself, and at that time there was not a whole lot of structure around it, but we knew that we had to fulfill that policy role. So some of the things we worked on very early on have borne fruit today. The investor tax credits in Wisconsin that go to investors who invest in qualified new business ventures. That's kind of a specific term, but think young companies. That was a big effort that involved us very directly in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s. We have successfully over time tried to make sure that various legislators or others have not imposed restrictions on state research sort of pathways, because we don't want Wisconsin to be a sore thumb compared to other states that perhaps don't do that kind of thing. The Badger Fund of Funds, which is statewide now, was something that we worked to get created. That was a little later on. The creation of our own Tech Council investor networks was a big deal, because at the time we started it, and it was kind of along the same time as those investor tax credits kicked in, there were really a half dozen or so angel networks and venture funds in Wisconsin. That was it. There just wasn't much out there. And today there are about 50. There are corporate funds like two that Northwestern Mutual has, for example.
Yep.
There are venture funds of all sizes, angel funds, other family offices. There's a variety of players in the field today. So we feel like that was a big part of what we got done. So those are some of the things. A lot of it is around what some people might think are ministerial, but they're larger than that. The changes we helped make in various state laws or regulations applying to, for example, research faculty in the UW system, that it made it easier for them to be entrepreneurs. So it's been a little bit from all those angles: capital, actual investment capital, human capital, the infrastructure itself. And there I should really mention broadband, because we pushed on that forever, and it's finally getting better in some ways around the state. So those are some of the what I consider to be really good accomplishments.
You made mention of not falling behind. Why is it so important for whether it's Wisconsin's goal to lead or at least make sure that we're not falling behind on the tech side? Why is that so important for all of us?
Oh, I think because technology, and you can define it in a lot of ways. I mean, it's more than information technology, right? I mean, it's also what I call broadly life sciences technology or advanced manufacturing technology. It touches every sector of what's made Wisconsin great over time. This is a manufacturing state. We're still, depending on the year, second or third per capita in manufacturing employees among all the states, and it's a very productive manufacturing sector. So technology and innovation has really made that more efficient, and it's continued to push it along and stay ahead as we've grown. Agriculture today, same thing. You think about precision in agriculture and all of the different pieces around that. That's changing that world. Even tourism.
Well, just real quick on that precision agriculture.
Yeah.
If someone is listening and hasn't heard the terminology precision agriculture, Google that and have your mind blown.
Yeah.
I think most people, especially maybe on the coast, and maybe I'm making some presumptions, or maybe it was my own thoughts about farming and whatnot, but my grandparents were farmers. And, you think about the old school way of farming. Most people do not realize how much science, how much technology is now in farming to yield the best crop, to do the most on the milk side of things, to do the most on getting seeds from this far apart or the exact portions apart that they need to be to yield the most in the acreage that they have. Like, precision agriculture is actually a fascinating deep dive one night on Google if you have the time.
Oh, I totally agree, and it helps create crops that are, in some cases, more drought resistant. Maybe can be grown more organically or whatever's needed there. It can, through the use of drones and other sort of geo mapping, it's, hey, where can this be best planted and what kind of rows and how far apart, as you noted. I mean, it's all a big part of it, and it's really changing the dairy industry, as you noted as well, from kind of how the cows are handled and treated and nurtured to what comes out on the product end. So it is fascinating.
All right, quick sales pitch. So we have some nationwide listeners as well. We're not just a local podcast, but give us your quick pitch on why someone should be or start up or join a tech company here in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin has a wide range of what people want in a day and age where there can be some concern about being in some sectors of the country that might be overheated. Um, the quality of life here, whether you're in Milwaukee, Madison, Appleton, Eau Claire, just about any place you want to point to around the state, is really high. The cost of doing business in Wisconsin, while not low, because you almost don't want low, but it is very predictable. It is something that it can be very attractive for companies that may be in other places where some of the costs are overheated. There is a huge research sector here, not only with our institutions of higher education, but also among companies. If you look at our sort of per capita research dollars invested, we're in the top 20 in the country.
That's awesome.
So that's big right there.
I like it. I'm sold.
Yeah. Okay.
I was an easy sale because I fought to stay here myself. So I wanted to raise my family here and continue to build relationships and build a business here. So yeah. I'm an easy sell, but I love some of your points there. What? No, you didn't touch on this with some of the bills, but were there any of the bills passed that helped either create or keep or build a bigger business for some of the big companies? I'm thinking specifically maybe here in Madison, but maybe throughout the state. I'm thinking Epic, Promega, Exact Sciences, some of the just fast-growing companies here in Madison. There's probably others throughout the state that I'm not making mention of, but were there any things that you guys specifically did or bills that passed that helped some of these major companies just spawn and grow as fast as they are?
I think some of the things that we did over time made it easier for corporations to get involved in the notion of investment funds, on the venture side. There were some tweaks in state laws and regulations that hopefully made that easier. For example, the larger investor credits program wasn't initially fully available to insurance companies in order to take part of that. So that's good. And because, again, insurance, what a Wisconsin business, right? When you think about Northwestern and all the others around the state that are active in that, it only made sense for them to be a part of that startup economy. I think in terms of sometimes, some of the treatments of how sales tax was applied to technology products, that was one that took a little work as well. So in general, I think the larger companies all benefit when the climate around them and below them is healthy as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. So speaking of the healthy climate and some of the wins, let's go to the opposite side of that. What are some of the biggest challenges facing new businesses or business in general throughout the state?
There was a time, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, I would have said that taxes was somewhere on that list. Wisconsin has steadily moved out of the top 5 in overall tax burden into kind of around like 15-ish now. Now, some would say that's still high, but that's out of that heat zone where you attract attention where you don't want to attract attention.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really good. I think the overall big challenge, and we talked about this a little bit before, but just talent, having the right workers for the companies and products and businesses of the future. There's a demographic challenge in Wisconsin. We skew a little bit older than some places. So we need to make sure that we attract our fair share of workers as well as growing our own. I think the education systems have to help produce those kinds of well-educated workers and make sure that we're just not leaving anybody behind in that regard. So that's a challenge, I think, as baby boomers begin to retire in larger numbers. I think companies need to look for where that talent's going to come from, and they're doing some creative things. But it is a challenge, right? I think overall there are some challenges around what I would call layers of government. Wisconsin has a state government, but 72 counties and hundreds of municipalities and villages, and sometimes those can overlap and create regulatory issues that maybe don't work for everyone. So that's one that's that's out there. And then finally, I just say investment capital in general. Even though we're a lot better than we were 15 years ago, there's still a lot to do. We still don't get much, not above the middle in terms of all states in venture capital. And even the middle is not great because 3 states, actually 4 states when I think about it, New York, Texas, California, Massachusetts, it's 85% of all venture capital. The rest of us are fighting over the other 15%.
Wow.
So that's where we need to continue to do some work. And by the way, the state of Wisconsin governor, Tony Evers, in his latest budget proposed a $100 million state investment in a privately matched venture capital fund that we think could make a big difference there. And that's something we've pushed for a long time.
Well, that's good. Hey, I want to go back to the education piece, and I might piss some people off with this, but I got to say it anyhow, because maybe you have some influence, maybe you don't. But so Wisconsin-Madison, UW-Madison is our premier public institution in the state. Mm-hmm. And the major frustrations I hear from parents with high school age kids is how hard it is for local students to get into our premier university. And yet we're in this dichotomy of, so they want more money from the out-of-state kids. And yet you and Northwestern Mutual and every other major company in the state wants to retain the talent locally. Well, what's the likelihood we're going to keep a New York State kid in Madison after college?
Right.
Not likely. But versus a local kid that grew up here, appreciates the lifestyle, appreciates the culture, appreciates the cost of living, the taxes, all that stuff, the Midwest kid, far more likely to retain that talent here. And so we have this dichotomy of the university wanting more money from out-of-state kids. Yep. Well, okay, I'm making that assumption. But I think the writing's on the wall, right? Treating it more like a business and then denying some of these local kids that would love to attend the university they rooted for growing up and can't do it.
Yeah. It is a tension that exists around the state that, yes, I've heard it before. I've seen it before. That indeed the university would love to have more people to kind of, sort of leaven the bread in a sense, people from elsewhere that help provide different aspects from different places, right? So it's not all just the tuition, but that's a part of it. It's very tough to get into the UW-Madison just in general. I think even for somebody out of state, it's a high quality institution with tough entrance requirements. And it can be really tough if you're from parts of Wisconsin where maybe you haven't had as many kind of extracurricular opportunities or different classes that you took that maybe get you in the door there. I mean, that said, there are other fine universities, public universities in Wisconsin.
Oh, sure are. I just want to say the premier one skews towards more out-of-state population at this point, percentage-wise. And then we were just talking about a dichotomy of lack of talent that we want to have in the tech sector. I think that, and it's the largest institution in the state because I went to Whitewater. I've had numerous friends that went to Marquette or Milwaukee or some of our other esteemed institutions, but Madison's by far the biggest, by far the most popular by name and probably the highest in academia quality in most areas. So.
Yeah, the UW-Madison is really about half undergrads and half graduate students. And the graduate side is where you see a lot of work on, with researchers and the sciences and everything else. And that's all good. Whitewater, that's a great example of an excellent school because of the different programs there, especially on the business school side, the entrepreneurship programs there, the poli-sci department. if you walk around the state capitol here in Madison, I guarantee you're going to run into a Whitewater graduate within about 10 minutes. They're everywhere. So yeah, I think the UW-Madison, one hope there, and then it maybe springs from the COVID time, in terms of more in-state people getting in, is the notion of virtual degrees and them being able to take in more returning students, new students, some combination that will make it more possible for people to have a UW-Madison degree. So I know the leadership there thinks about this, and they want to think about striking that balance. But you're right. There's a whole bunch of kids who would love to go to UW-Madison, maybe
and stay here after.
Yeah, they're out there.
Yeah, and stay here after. I think that's the biggest key that you and I were talking about.
It is.
Let's keep them here. And again, if they're a grad student from here, or they went to undergrad here and stayed here, they're more likely to start their company here versus going back to where they grew up.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about that. And it applies at the graduate level, too.
Yep. Oh, exactly. So what markets or industries do you see having the most potential for new business in our state?
I think I want to start with some of the existing markets, because I think it will be innovation in some of those existing markets that lead to some new businesses. Manufacturing, agriculture, even tourism, which is big in Wisconsin. I think we're going to see some dramatic changes there over time and more new businesses. I think on what you may think of as the pure tech side, there continues to be a lot of innovation and new companies around digital health. Whether it's electronic health records, whether it's other aspects of digital health. Telemedicine is a great example right now. That's grown exponentially during the pandemic time. I think that there's a lot more software businesses in Wisconsin than people recognize. The Computer Technology Industry Association, it goes by CompTIA. When you look at where the tech workers are, there are a number of engineering sections and also a number in software, what they call software publishing sort of sector. And that can mean, it can mean anybody from Epic in Verona to people who are doing various software around fintech, around insurtech, around, again, they're kind of, in some cases, connected to sectors we already have strength. So I think gaming has surprising legs in Wisconsin. Water-based companies, there's been a lot of discussion around that. I think most of the innovation so far has tended to work around existing companies, but there's a lot of hope that some of the younger companies in water are coming out. Clean tech, sort of energy-based companies, I think those are all potential for growth in Wisconsin.
Nice. So potential for growth, and then we've seen the news over the past 12 months and the mass exodus from California, right?
Yeah.
And I know that Texas and Arizona have been benefactors of some of that exodus from California. I don't know if Wisconsin has or not, or if you know that, but what are your general thoughts about what's going on in that exodus from California, and hopefully making sure that we don't ever see that exodus happening?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to some of those points earlier when you ask about, what are the selling points for Wisconsin? Quality of life. That's maybe less so now in places like the Silicon Valley. The cost of doing business, same thing. Some of the companies that are rooted there have been looking elsewhere because simply that. They think about their employees having to drive forever to get to work. And this is, pre-COVID and everything, but still it's out there. They look at the housing costs. They look at just everything about what it takes to live there. And it's not as attractive. So that's part of what's going on with those especially in California. Now,
Outside of the weather, obviously the weather is very attractive.
sure. That's going to work for, just about any part of California, one way or the other. You're correct. Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, those are the kinds of places that are kind of first to get see some of the good effects of that exodus, because they're closer to California, number one, but also it's kind of a Rocky Mountain region that maybe there's some more affinity or familiarity. But places like, the mayor of Miami, Florida, has made a big point of, hey, come here. And I don't know how much success they've had truly, but it is an overt welcome sign that they posted there. And so other places like Austin, Texas, but I think we can see some benefits in Wisconsin. At least we say this ourselves, and this is a little more anecdotal than anything, from investors who are from the coast who would like to see more deals from Wisconsin.
Good.
The reason for that is valuation. Great tech, great people, hard work ethic, but also the valuation of the companies are not somehow frothy or super inflated.
Yeah, overinflated by any means. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit before we get into the word game, because I want to be respectful of your time. For our young professionals that might be listening, that might have the entrepreneurial bug, what advice would you give them, I guess possibly in general, but then also how to leverage WTC resources?
Yeah. Well, I think in general, there are a couple of different ways to become an entrepreneur. I mean, some people, I honestly think some people are born that way. It's just that bug they have. I think some can experience that in other ways, whether through school or being a part of something that they really enjoy. But by and large, sometimes it can be going into a large company setting and discovering you don't really like it. I've seen that before, where people have been in maybe some larger companies that they didn't feel like it just wasn't right for them. It didn't tap into what they do, what they want to do. I've also seen the opposite. I've seen people get into entrepreneurial settings and come out of that and say, geez, this is too much of a roller coaster ride for me. I gotta get off and, find some kind of stability in at least this part of my life. So I guess advice is and this applies to us, but I mean, there are many other great groups too that it could apply to, is, get involved. Sometimes I see entrepreneurs who are kind of head in the screen all the time, right? And just they're working themselves so much they don't get connected to the larger network. And entrepreneurs can wind up feeling kind of lonely if they don't connect with others kind of like themselves. So that's one of the big things about our events. People get to talk to other entrepreneurs and investors and people in the ecosystem and come away kind of being rejuvenated. That hey, I'm not the only one out there struggling with this issue or that issue. And so I think that networking piece is pretty big.
So don't have blinders on. Don't just get so, like you said, just buried in your screen.
Yes.
Get out there and meet. And like I will just say, from a personal standpoint, I'm not the man I am today without my national study group. They all happen to be similar to what I do, or similar position within Northwestern and now outside Northwestern, whatever it might be. But those men have poured into my life, and they all happen to be men. And just on a personal level, on a business level, on every different level, that has made me a better person, a better leader, a better father, all those different things. So as you say, like, network, form these relationships, always be a student, just got to get outside your screen sometimes.
Yeah, it's really true. And, entrepreneurs who are hesitant to do so, I think only wind up costing themselves. They think I need to do this time on the business and just, straight in the ledger book, straight in whatever. But yeah, it's, business is still about relationships at the end of the day. And so, forming those is really important.
It is. It is. All right. Any other words of advice for our entrepreneurs?
No, I think just be curious, be inquisitive, and be a joiner, like we just discussed, get out there and mix it up. And it can be, any number of organizations that would welcome you and, look around and try to find your right fit.
All right. You ready for the word game?
I think so.
All right. So for our audience that hasn't heard it before, I will say one word, and Tom in this instance is going to give his gut reaction first word or maybe a short phrase. The only rule is he cannot repeat himself. All right. First word, Tom. Change.
Inevitable.
Laws.
Society's order.
Government.
It can be a friend.
That's probably good for a lot of people, including myself, to hear right now, thinking that it might not be. But anyhow, all right, business.
Lifeblood.
Grit.
Tenacity.
Money.
Not everything, but it's a lot.
Wisconsin.
Great state.
College.
Not for everyone.
Including myself. Inspire.
Motivate.
Impact.
Get stuff done.
Good job. Those were good answers. We haven't had those before.
Oh, okay.
That's good. No, that's why I love getting everyone's different perspective on those. And we don't always say the same words. It's kind of tailored to each guest, but those were insightful.
Yeah.
All right. So favorite book of all time, or a book that you most recently read that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Boy, I'm really so eclectic on that. I mean, one thing I can say is, like, as much as anything, some favorite authors. I'm kind of a history geek. And so I love reading about, in particular, American history. So James McPherson has written a lot about different American presidents. Stephen Ambrose, by the way, a Whitewater guy. I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he wrote like the Band of Brothers and the kind of the ultimate D-Day book, and
Surprised they weren't touting him more when I was there.
Yeah. Maybe he didn't donate enough. I don't know.
That might be it. He doesn't have his name on a building yet.
Yeah. Well, and he passed on a little bit early, in his life, I think. But a lot of great looks at the Lewis and Clark expedition, Undaunted Courage. That was really one of my favorite books because it went into this incredible detail about the Lewis and Clark expedition to the Pacific Northwest in 1803 to 1805. But that was Stephen Ambrose.
That's cool. That's definitely something I learned today. And so how can the audience follow WTC, get in touch with you if need be, or what's the best way for anyone in the audience that's listening to do that?
Sure. Well, there's always email, and I'm tstill@wisconsin-technology-council.com. Kind of longish, but we had to do that for a variety of reasons because there are other similar things. So there's that. We're on social media, in Twitter, Facebook, on LinkedIn. So that's good. And then I think, our website is really a good source. It has a lot about our policy accomplishments over time. It has all of our events. So that's just wisconsin-technology-council.com. So those are three good paths. And, somebody looks me up and wants to talk or something, I'm all for it.
Awesome. Well, appreciate all your knowledge and time today, Tom, pouring into our audience. I know that we got a lot about Wisconsin. We got a lot about entrepreneurship, and we got a little bit about what I think the UW needs to do. But besides that, it was a great conversation.
Right.
And appreciate your time. And for the audience, hopefully you got some notes taken down, and remember to go out and inspire and impact on your daily basis.